Dr. Arun Kumar, who I'm sure has a very different point of view, because you've been writing away about how the informal sector, you believe, has been virtually destroyed in the last decade, and that has led, you believe, fundamentally to the employment crisis at the bottom of the pyramid. You've heard what Manish Sabharwal said. He believes there should be more formalization of the economy. Your response?
Rajdeep, the problem is with the data. You mentioned the RBI report. The RBI report is a claims report. It is capital, labor, etc., right? The problem is that it doesn't give independent data. It uses the government's data from labor, force data and from the ASUS data. So it's not an independent report. It is being projected as if the RBI is giving the data. RBI is simply using that data. Now, the point is that, this is the kind of confusion that is being created, that RBI is also supporting the government's claim. Now, why does the Citibank differ? The Citibank differs because it is using CMIE data. It is not using the data that the government puts out to the PLFS and the ASUS data, right? So the definition of unemployment and employment differs between the CMIE and between the government data. The government data says that if you're working, even if you're not getting a wage, then you are counted as a worker and employed. The CMI data uses the ILO definition, where if you're not getting a wage in the market, then you're not counted as employed. So what it effectively means is that the unorganized sector, which is 94% of the employment, that is where actually the unemployment is. And that will not go away by formalization. The more you formalize, the technology that is used in the formal sector, the organized sector, is so highly automated. And with the use of artificial intelligence, it is actually going to be even less employment generating. So in a sense, the more you have the organized sector in terms of GDP, the more you have the mechanization and the automation, the more problem of employment generation you will have.
But isn't that, if I may ask you for a moment, Professor Kumar, isn't that inevitable? I mean, at some level, the automation, the fact that for a certain formalization will have to take place is inevitable in a country like India, isn't it? I know that the informal sector remains vast and provides huge amounts of jobs at the bottom of the pyramid, but eventually governments will look to formalize, surely, as growth rates pick up.
No, it depends on what our priorities are. Do we prioritize human beings and their employment compared to what the producers in the organized sector want? Do we prioritize technology over people? What is it that is our priority in the nation, where, a large number of youth and the unemployment is concentrated in educated youth? According to the ILO, 84% of the unemployment is in the educated youth. You saw recently how, in the Air India, there was a crush because, thousands of people came for a few hundred jobs. You saw, for instance, the police, exam in UP, where for 60,000 jobs, 46 lakh people applied. You saw earlier in the railways for 35,000 non-technical jobs, 1.2 crore people applied. For the earlier, the peons job of 360 jobs, 23 lakh people applied, of which 380 were PhDs. There were 2 lakh BTech, MTech, BCom, MCom applying for these jobs. So there is a huge problem of unemployment amongst the women because the labor force participation rate there is very low. It is amongst the educated youth. And this is going to create a huge social problem. That's why in the elections we saw there was a huge anger. So the question is, what is the nation's priority? Are we going to prioritize employment over other things, or are we going to prioritize organized sector? Because you see, organized sector gets 80% of the investment, but hardly generates any jobs. It is the unorganized sector where in agriculture and in the micro sector that you generate jobs.
I think this is the nub of the debate. I'll get Manish to respond in a moment, but Shankar Iyer, why don't you give us a sense? You've heard two viewpoints which perhaps represent two sides of the spectrum. Manish Sabharwal saying you need to formalize the economy, you need to remove some of the regulatory cholesterol that exists, and you've got Professor Arun Kumar who says, look, the priority has to be to strengthen in a way the informal sector, micro enterprises, because they are the high employment generators. Your response?
Well, the Cambridge economist Joan Robinson once said, anything and everything that you say about India, the opposite is equally true. So we live in those ages. Basically, what we are looking at is an issue that has haunted India for decades. And for decades, India has been solving yesterday's problems. Without growth, you will only redistribute poverty. We saw that in Karnataka. You can't create more jobs, so you reallocate the options, the percentages that's happening. Let's look at it. What can be done? I mean, how are jobs created? When you propel growth, you solve some of the problems of the country or the nation, of the economy. Let me give you just two instances. Maybe this will make things clear for you and the audience. India has a food price inflation problem. One of the solutions is to expand food processing. The Food Processing Ministry was formed in 1988. India wastes something to the extent of 80,000 crores of standing crops, wastage, rotting, whatever you call it. Only 10% of India's food is processed. Food processing is at the intersection of urban and rural economy. It can absorb low skill, no skill people. Are we pushing that? Now, yes, this has to be done by the states. And this government has been in power in around 15 states for over 10 years. The same story with Congress previously. So state government. So what we are doing normally is that we give a free pass to the state governments on most issues. Manish spoke about regulatory cholesterol. A large part of it is in the state government. Let me give you another example. India has around 4,000 census towns, which are neither villages nor towns. Urbanization is a known force multiplier for growth. In 2015, Venkaiah Naidu, as Urban Development Minister, wrote to all the state governments asking them to convert these census towns into municipalities. Each of these census towns would have created around 100 jobs, would have created indirect jobs, would have led to growth as urbanization drives growth. Have we seen that happening? No. Why? Because state governments don't want to do that. The question, India is one of those economies where you are constantly staring at the problem and the solution simultaneously.
That's interesting the way you're again putting it there, Shankar. I'll get you to look at this center-state issue again, because state governments say it is the center which has been restrictive. We can discuss that. Whether the center takes the responsibility of the states. I'll get the two politicians. It's good to have politicians listening first to others and get them to respond now.